I call Todd
Another lamb to the
Barclay.
slaughter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a privilege to speak on the Taxation, Kiwisaver, Homestart and Remedial Matters Bill in its third reading. This is the bill we're talking about, and as we all know, this taxation bill introduces amendments to the Kiwisaver Act 2006 and the Income Tax Act 2007, which will allow Kiwisaver members to withdraw their member tax credits when purchasing their first home, and it corrects the tax, social policy and Kiwisaver treatment of veterans' income placement payments as well, Mr Speaker. I've been listening since the start of today's speeches on this bill, and it's been quite interesting hearing the Labor Party and the Greens speak about their views on what should be happening in the housing market. Firstly, it's quite interesting to hear that they think $521 in tax credits on top of the other contributions, including their own and the employers, that they can access to buy their first home or build their first home is insufficient. I'd have to say, in the category of being a first home buyer, anything is better than nothing. And $521 on top of the other benefits that the government's been introducing is sufficient. And it's I think it would be welcomed by any home buyer who in any sense. They also think that first home buyers shouldn't get to choose where they live. Well, as David Bennett pointed out, that's just an absolutely communist point of view on the world. People should have the ability to be able to decide where they want to live, where they want to bring up their families and their children. They should have the choice to be able to do that wherever they want to do that. One point I probably would make, though, is that being of the younger generation, slightly a couple of generations behind the previous speaker, would be that perhaps people of my generation have quite high expectations around first home buyer ownership. I think there is many of my peers enter the home market in their first stages with an expectation they can enter at the point at which their parents are currently at. And I think it's probably worth remembering that people of our sort of parents' generation and that age group have bought their way up the home market ladder to the point they're at now. So I think maybe a point to first home buyers, and myself will be included, would be to maybe lower our expectations where appropriate. Obviously the Auckland situation is a different sort of kettle of fish than other areas in the country. Queenstown's similar in my area as well, but as we look around, there is significant homes being built, and a lot of it is targeted at the first home buyers. Paula Bennett and Michael Woodhouse were down a couple of weeks ago, and we looked at the work that the Queenstown Lakes Housing Trust is doing to work with developers to secure a portion of new development land to be targeted towards first home buyers, and there are a number of schemes that are focused on that, Mr Speaker. The other point that the Labor Party made was that these changes are inconsequential. Well, if anybody in the right mind that thinks that 90,000 people who will benefit from this is inconsequential, I'm not too sure exactly what they're considering, because 90,000 people benefiting from the change that this government's making is significant, and it shouldn't be brushed over. Also, probably worth reminding members of the public of Labor's track record when it came to affordable housing. Under the 9 years that Labor was in government, house prices went up by 96%. And while of the 6 years that we've been in government so far to date, Mr Speaker, they've only gone up 27%, which shows that we've got a greater handle on how to manage the economy and to manage all the different levers that have an impact on the cost of housing. And another point would be around Labor Party's views around what we're doing with regard to affordable housing is what exactly would they know? We had an election last year where the public clearly voted with their feet and backed our view on how we should be tackling the issue of housing affordability. Labor Party think that a capital gains tax is the answer. The public rejected that. The Labor Party think that building 100,000 houses at a cost of $300,000 each on a section that will cost $325,000 in Auckland is the answer. For anybody who's even considered any form of economics would know that that's economically illiterate. And it was actually that member over there who made up this policy, and it was widely rejected by all members of the public. And then I'll move on to what the Green Party have been saying. They think that they don't want people to own their own homes at all, Mr Speaker. In fact, they want the government to own their homes. They want around $300,000 to build a home, not taking into account how they'll buy the land or how they'll come into account of the land, and they think they'll charge people $200 a week. I think the economics behind the Green Party policy is even looser than what it was behind the Labor Party's policies, Mr Speaker. And then we're talking about intensification of housing. The Green Party think that intensification of housing's the answer. However, intensification in every other respect for them isn't the answer. So it's contradictory for them to say that we should intensify in this area but not intensify in other areas which are more productive areas of the economy, such as the use of farmland and the use of other productive assets in this country, Mr Speaker. And just while we're on the Green Party, we wouldn't trust them in the hands of the economy anyway. But given their previous leadership candidates, here's their views on what they think the state of the economy is. Vernon Tava thought that the OCR rate was 7.8%.
That's not part of the bill.
Okay, sorry, Mr Speaker. Talking about inflation then, which is contributing towards the...
No.
Okay, we'll go back on to this bill at hand. So this bill, as we know, is about supporting first home buyers and honouring our election pledge, Mr Speaker. And as we know, as part of in relation to the Homestart package, which was announced during last year's election, and it comprises a number of components which will come into effect the 1st of April this year. The first is replacing the Kiwisaver first home deposit subsidy with a Kiwisaver Homestart grant, which doubles the support for first home buyers and increases the house price limits, which is significant in many areas across the country, including my own area, Mr Speaker. The second component of that is enabling larger Kiwisaver first home withdrawals, and this is being done by including the members' tax credit, which is included in this bill, meaning that first home buyers will now be able to withdraw on their Kiwisaver savings, except for the $1,000 kickstart. So the components that they can draw on is their contributions that they've put in over the years they've been a member of the scheme, and also their employers' contributions. And then thirdly, expanding the eligibility of welcome home loans by aligning the house price caps with the new Kiwisaver Home Start grants. So we're roughly doubling the number of people who are receiving government grants to buy their first home from 10,000 people a year to 20,000 a year, Mr Speaker, and it's doubling the government's grant that they're eligible if they're buying or building their first home. Currently, first home buyers are eligible for a grant of $3,000, Mr Speaker, after 3 years in Kiwisaver, $4,000 after 4 years in Kiwisaver, and $5,000 after 5 years. And under Kiwisaver Homestart, this grant will double to $6,000 after 3 years, $8,000 after 4 years, and $10,000 after 5 years for purchasing a newly built home. So on top of the $521, which is insufficient and inconsequential, we've actually taken other steps to increase the facilities and means for first home buyers and first home builders to access capital to make their first step onto the housing ladder, Mr Speaker. Just want to remind the members of the public as well what the Labor Party's position is, and I'm not too sure exactly myself if I've got it clear yet, given there's been quite conflicting views that have been set out over the last week or so. And but this is what I understand it to be, which is we need large-scale urban developers backed by private sector developers and community housing organisations. Such developments can't happen without the government playing a role.
Order.
Sectors.
The member is slightly unlucky in that I was in the House when my predecessor warned him earlier about sticking with the bill and not other parties' positions. It was yet another party that he was warned about, but I will warn him that if he continues down that line, his speech will be terminated.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Just getting back to the nature of this bill, where first home buyers are able to access their tax contributions for the provision or the purchase of their first home, or more likely to go towards their mortgage. It's in the context, as I was saying, Mr Speaker, in the context of a number of other changes that have happened, that have taken place by this government, including allowing first home buyers to be able to access their contributions and their employers' contributions to the Kiwisaver scheme. And we're sort of seeing the effects of that already as part of the wider implications, which this bill will only help to advance, Mr Speaker, and it's seen residential construction increase by 21% already, and that more than 24,000 building consents were issued, the highest number since 2008. And I think the next part of this Mr. Speaker, was I just wanted to touch a little bit on what was discussed in the committee stages of this bill and where the amendments were made at committee stage. And they primarily focus on the Kiwisaver scheme rules relating to members' withdrawals. And one particular amendment in particular, Mr. Speaker, was a move to ensure that membership in a complying superannuation fund for 3 years may count towards qualifying for a first home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I commend this bill.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Taxation, Kiwisaver, Homestart and Remedial Matters Bill, third reading.
I call on Government Order of the Day number 2.
Interrupted debate on the second reading of the Human Rights Amendment